Hello everybody, my name is TricksterShadow, variety killer man with over 7,500 hours in DBD, and today I wanted to bring up this most recent tweet that Behavior put out. It seems like Behavior is trying to be a little bit more transparent with their changes, which is a good thing to see. I've also noticed that there's a lot more patches lately, at least in my opinion there has been, and so it's good to see like them actually trying to like put effort in the game, them trying to be transparent with telling us things. And the most recent thing they're being transparent with, this tweet came out, I think, like 20 or 30 minutes ago from the time of this recording. And they came out with some stats about the decisive strike change. Don't know what the change was to decisive strike. Pretty much decisive strike the way it used to work. It's had many different iterations over the years, but the most recent change is instead of it being every 60 seconds, or when you get unhooked, you'd have 60 seconds of being able to like get off the killer's shoulder if they pick you up. They made it to where for 60 seconds after you get off the hook, same thing where if the killer downs you, then they can pick you up and you can get off if you hit a skill check. But now it'll turn off if you do pretty much most actions. If you like start cleansing a totem, if you start healing somebody else, if you start doing a gen, and then the DS hammer will turn off. It doesn't turn off for doing pig boxes or like anything to do with powers. It doesn't turn off for exegates or anything like that. Only really gens, totems, and healing, as far as I can recollect. There's probably something else. And but those are like the main things. So after they did that, that's a huge change because I mean, like gens, totems, and healing are three things that survivors will be doing a lot throughout the entire match. And so by making it where DS turns off by doing those actions, you can make it to where DS is a lot more limited in use case. And so as a result of it being a lot more limited in use case, not being as versatile in the matches, and of course it being as versatile was a bit of a source of contention. A lot of people didn't like that. They thought like, oh, DS a tunneling perk is just literally invulnerability, which I can understand because there are some cases to where like people kind of like somebody goes and they pop a gin in your face and there's nothing you can do about it because they just have DS and so they can just be off free. But of course, in that case, you can just down them. But then it goes in the whole argument of like, oh, what if they're running DS and Breakable and all that, and it just keeps on going and going and going. But like I was saying, they made it where it's less versatile, a little bit less of a use case, and so as a result, they put out these stats, and we can actually see because of it having less of a use case, it actually went down in use. To where instead of in 27% of survivor builds, you would find DS, now it's only 16%. And I wonder if that's going to continue to go down even after the fact. I don't know how long these stats were taken from. At least the after one, I guess after one, after the change. Uh, but I believe they said in the comments that it's within 3 months. So like 3 months before the change was 27% usage and escape rate at 49%, and then after the change, like in the past like month and a half, maybe 2 months, it was 16%, and then escape rate is 49%. So the escape rate hasn't changed, but the usage has changed, and I'm I have a few different thoughts about this. If you're curious about my opinion about the DS change, I think the DS change was a little bit too harsh, in my opinion. I feel like it should have just instead of completely turning off the perk, I feel like it should have just like doubled the rate at which it ticks down. So if you have DS for 60 seconds and you get on a gen, then it starts going twice as fast the timer to where like the maximum time would be 30 seconds, if that makes sense. And of course, if you get off the gen, then it would go to like the normal speed and it would just tick down normally. And I feel like that would have been a lot better. That would have made it to where, because there are times to where like you're playing against like say like a legion or like a wraith tagging everybody and everybody's injured, and you end up having to try to like heal like the other person that just saved you because like they're on death hook and you were just on your first hook, and you want to try to make sure that they survive, and then the killer comes back and then tunnels you out of the game and then just GG. And like those are times where I feel like tunneling uh like I would consider that still tunneling, even though like, oh, you're healing somebody else, you're obviously not being tunneled. It's stuff like that where it disables within the millisecond of you touching somebody else. I feel like that is a bit dumb, and I feel like that is still tunneling, even though like, yeah, you're doing another objective or you're healing somebody else. You're a survivor. Like you can't be expected to not do anything in the match because then the match is just gonna be lost. And so being expected not to do the objective just because you're running a perk is kind of a silly thing, in my opinion at least. And I've noticed that in my killer games have been a lot easier, like so much more easier. In my opinion, I think killer gets easier every patch, and it has been for the past 2 years, in my opinion. And I with this DS change, I pretty much never see DS. I'll I would say that like even if like I do like go after somebody and I want to get them out of the game, like say they have a key or something and I'm trying to get them out of the game before they can use their key, I see DS like probably like a quarter of the time maybe in my experiences. I'll see DS. It's a lot more common when people run keys and stuff like that because they know they're gonna get tunneled. But I just really don't see it that much. It doesn't really change games all too much for me. And previously, I would see it a lot because I play some killers like Nurse or Blight or Billy to where I can down people super fast. I could down like 3 or 4 people within the span of 60 seconds. And so I could have the entire team's DS active and I'd be hit with DS after DS after DS. But now this, I rarely see it. Even when playing those killers, I rarely get DS'd, if ever. And so it's made it to where my games are just more of a steamroll as a result. Like a subtle flex. But that's not the reason why I'm saying. I'm just saying like I don't really see it anymore. It just doesn't exist as much. But what I'm curious about is the actual escape rate remaining the same. Now, assuming these stats are correct, which I'm going to assume that they are because they're from the official Dead by Daylight Twitter account, if the escape rate stays the same, then like why is that the case? And I think that the reason why the escape rate has stayed the same, and of course the usage rate has gone down to DS, because that is a bit curious. Because like if people are still tunneling and the tunneling perk is being used less, then you would assume that like less people are surviving. But of course, I think this is just escape rate based on people who use DS. That's actually, I didn't even think about that. That this isn't even like escape rate for survivors. This is escape rate for people that run DS. And so the escape rate for people that run DS hasn't changed, but I'm curious about what the escape rate is for people that don't run DS, like how that changed from the patch. That'd be very interesting information to know as well, but they haven't provided that information. But anyways, what I wanted to talk about though is if people aren't running DS anymore, then like how are they changing their gameplay? How are they adjusting? What are they moving to? And so from what I've noticed, because I've been playing a lot of Survivor and a lot of Killer ever since the DS change, and just in the past few months in general, I've noticed that with the DS change, I've noticed a lot more people focusing on gens and splitting up on gens. I've been noticing even like in the solo queue, I've been seeing a lot of people split up on gens. A lot more people running like borrowed time. A lot of people running desperate measures as well. I've been seeing a lot of that, and just more like their altruism is shifting. And if they can't be altruistic, then they're just pumping out gens and leaving. And so I think this kind of shows like it exemplifies a big problem with DBD and that the design choice for a lot of the decisions for the devs that they make is instead of actually addressing problems, they will put in a perk into the game that'll kind of band-aid fix the problem, and then they'll address the problem like years down the road. So like when it comes to, and this has happened many times before, like if if you've played this game for a while, you'll know like the old ruin, the first ruin, the way it would work is when ruin was up as a hex totem, it would make to where if you did a good skill check, it would regress the generator a little bit, and if you did a great, it would just like progress the generator normally. And so that would significantly slow down games. And the reason why they put in that perk is because gens were going way too fast, the maps were way too good, that the killers just couldn't keep up. And so instead of addressing the maps, or instead of addressing gen speed, really, they just put in a perk into the game to make it where the gens go slower artificially. And kind of like the same thing with Decisive Strike, to where they noticed that people were tunneling off hook. People were just kind of like tunneling and camping, and there's really not much you could do about it from like the survivor point of view, because you just like get off hook and then you instantly die. They put in something like Decisive Strike, to where instead of addressing the actual tunneling and punishing players who do that through gameplay changes, they just put in a perk that punishes that artificially if the person's running that. And I honestly think that like, and like there's been people will say like, "Oh, Decisive Strike needs to be base kit, Bartend needs to be base kit." And while that would be interesting, I would love to test out stuff like that. I do definitely think that DBD needs to address how they balance their game instead of just using perks to just fill in the balance, just kind of as a band aid solution. Because there shouldn't be if the because like at the end of the day, Dead by Daylight, they're trying to make a fun game. That's what they're trying to do. And so if they're trying to make a fun game, then they need to address all of these situations to where the game is unfun. That typically, like you would hope that that's what they're trying to zero in on and try to fix. And so things like tunneling and camping, you got to think about like, okay, not only how do we prevent killers from doing that, but why are killers doing that? So like we need to de-incentivize killers from like tunneling and camping and making it to where they're actually punished through gameplay for doing stuff like that. And of course, you could argue that like, oh, if the survivors gen rush, then the tunneling and camping doesn't really matter. But if you ever played solo queue, you'll know that it does matter tunneling and camping. And so you got to think about like, okay, like why do killers tunnel and camp? Okay, well you have like a small portion of killers that tunnel and camp just because they want to ruin other people's days. There are people like that. They just know that people don't have fun with that, and so because people don't have fun with that, they purposely do it to try to ruin people's days. And then there's also a portion of people that the reason why they tunnel and camp is because they're trying to supplement their poor gameplay. They know that they're not a great killer, and so they're trying to get somebody out as soon as possible in order to be able to have a chance in the game. And then you have another portion of people, which I think is the last portion of people, that they tunnel and camp because they're kind of like on the backslide of a match. Like there's 3 gens done. They only have 2 hooks. They need to get somebody out in order to get pressure back. And so they're tunneling and camping in order to get the pressure back so that they can possibly try to win. And so the people that are just being mean, you can't really do much about that. You could change the gameplay a little bit, but if people are going to be mean, they're going to be mean. And so if you want to change tunneling and camping, you want to really focus on the mean people because they're always going to find some way to ruin people's stays. I'd focus on the people that tunnel and camp because they know that they're not great at the game. Maybe like an MMR system would be good. I know I've talked about like an MMR system would be kind of iffy for Dead by Daylight because not everybody wants to be competitive. But if there was an MMR system, maybe you'd be able to match up people a little bit better than the current ranking system. At least something better than the ranking system. It doesn't even have to be like a competitive MMR, just something to where people feel like they're a little bit more evenly skilled, because that is a big reason why some people tunnel and camp. And then for the people that tunnel and camp because they're trying to get time back during the match. Okay, they're trying to get time back during the match because of why? Oh, because the generators are getting done too fast. Okay, why are the generators getting done too fast? That's kind of a complex issue, and it kind of goes down like kind of like a logic tree of like, oh, it's the gens are getting done so fast because like a portion of those people they're just like committing to chases for too long. Okay, and then like the other portion of people they're like there's too many safe pallets on the map, or another portion of people the generators are going too fast because everybody's just splitting up on gens, and no matter what the killer does, the gens get done no matter what, and the map is too big in order for them to pressure. And so there's a bunch of little things that supplement very simple reasons for like things happening. And so like when tunneling and camping happens, there's a multitude of things that are the reason why these things happen. And it goes back into like I've talked about before, how Dead by Daylight is kind of like a death by 1,000 cuts, to where there's not like one big problem that Dead by Daylight suffers from. It's more 1,000 little problems that add up into the big problems. And so when tunneling camping exists only because of the thousands of problems that haven't been addressed yet in the game. Like some pallets or some maps having pallets that are just way too safe. Like most recent map that they changed in the game is pretty much all safe pallets. And if a survivor runs from each pallet to pallet, it's really hard for you to win. But stuff like that where just like maps are too safe or maps are too big, like Mother's Dwelling, or making it to where like, oh, survivors are just too efficient, they're splitting up on gens, there's not much you can do. Stuff like that is never addressed, and so it incentivizes people to play more scummy in order to try to win the match, because the game won't the developers won't fix those lacking aspects of the game. And so I hope that not only like with them showing us the stats, I hope they bring us more stats. I would love to see the hook stats of Dead by Daylight, like how many hooks killers get on average and like how many hooks they get on each map. Because I feel like hooks are more indicative of how well a killer is doing than hook states. Because I can camp somebody to death and that'd be 3 hook states, but it'd only be 1 hook, and so that wouldn't be as impressive. But what I mainly want to see, besides stats, is I want to see Dead by Daylight actually addressing core gameplay issues without having to just put band aid perks on the problem. Because I feel like if Dead by Daylight even addressed a couple of the main gameplay elements that are lacking, then it would make the player experience much better. If they made it to where, okay, generators are getting done too fast because the maps are too big. If they made it to where all the maps are standardized and they're only like a maximum like width and height or width and length, then the maps wouldn't be too big and people would be able to effectively pressure if they actually know how to play the game instead of it being like Mother's Dwelling, which is like 15 coal towers. I'm kind of exaggerating, but you know what I mean. And then that just fixing that one thing would lead to less camping, less tunneling, and stuff like that. And then if there is still a problem with camping and tunneling, then address that. Even after like you address like all of the things that go into camping and tunneling and the reason why people do it legitimately, if it's still a problem, then you can adjust the gameplay and make it aware, oh, like okay, a killer's camping and like we've already done all these things for the killers. We made the maps like less in size, we made it to where there's less like super safe pallets. Then oh, people are still camping. Okay, make it to where like you know how like Pyramid Head, you like transfer it to another like position whenever the Pyramid Head is tunneling. They make it the same for hooks, to where if a killer is camping the hook and he grabs up the survivor and puts them on another hook, just like stuff like that, to where if you fix all the underlying issues of the problem and the problem still exists, then you can actually then address the problem. Because like with them changing the decisive strike, it's not them addressing the underlying issues and like the reason why people run decisive strike. It's just addressing decisive strike, and that's why a lot of people had problems with it. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. This is more of like a rambly video of me just talking about my opinions about the decisive strike and about like the state of the game. I'm actually really happy with a lot of the changes that Dead by Daylight has been making lately, and I'm actually very curious to see what they keep on doing. Of course, they have the Resident Evil chapter uh, reveal that is coming out next week. So if you guys want to see that, I'm actually going to be doing that on my live stream next Tuesday. So if you want to follow me on there or follow me on Discord or Twitter, I'll be tweeting out and putting on Discord whenever that's going to be happening and telling people about it. I'll do my live reaction. I'll probably upload that to YouTube as well, showing off, oh, like this is what I think of like the chapter and like these are my predictions of like what's going on, how I react to certain things. And so if you guys are curious about that, that'll be next Tuesday. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next video. Hopefully you have a good rest of your day, night, or whatever. And bye-bye.